Hello, everybody. Welcome back. So this is the second of our talks on shifts, trends in social policy, thinking of recent decades. We're zooming in on the cases of England and Germany. I'm going to give you some social work perspectives in this particular video. Indeed, that's going to be my starting point. How do social workers see this trend, this neoliberalism that's entering our country's social policy discourses? How do they see this neoliberalism? So scratch your heads, natter with your partner. How do social workers with their particular political background view this political trend? Now, to put it into context before you think about all of that, don't forget, if you're one of my students watching this in Fechter, you're probably not a social worker. Typically, I teach more social work management students than social work students. And don't forget that your instincts, by virtue of studying management, BVL, is going to be different from a social worker's instincts. So yeah, put on your thinking caps, have a head scratch. What do you think? I can give you some answers very, very easily. This is from page 1 of Ferguson. He's a critical social work author. He's kind of defining neoliberalism, but have a look at this. The ideology that tells us that everything, public services, the environment, life itself, should be subordinated to the requirements of the market and big business. So we're seeing a kind of definition of neoliberalism. You know, he's rather casually defining it on page 1 of his text. But note the anger there. You know, there's and sarcasm as well. You know, this idea that everything can be put to the market, so to say. So I think Ferguson's instincts here, you know, the anger, but the frustration in this sentence, I think that is very, very typical of social workers. Why? It's worth asking, why do social workers have this hostility to the idea of neoliberalism? Some professions really are tied to particular political movements. And I think social work may be one of the best examples of that. Social workers looking after the poor, the oppressed, the disadvantaged. Our profession has roots to the growth of social democracy, to the growth of socialist thinking. So social workers have a tendency to be left-wing. Not all of them are, but many of them have left-wing or even strong left-wing tendencies. And that's really, really a fascinating aspect of our profession. It's part of our professional identity. And don't forget our international approach, the definition, the global definition of social work that we had in week 1 of this course. That global definition had words like social justice in. So there you are, social work, unsurprisingly concerned with the social, fairly nervous, fairly anxious, fairly worried about this shift to neoliberal policies. My second example of this is not actually a social worker, but rather an educationalist, but hey, that's a related profession to ours. Have a look, there's a lovely clip on the internet, Henry Giroux speaking about neoliberalism. The clip's 10 minutes long, and you can watch it in its entirety if you wish. But it's really the 90 seconds of the beginning that I want you to focus on. He just says a few sentences about neoliberalism. Have a watch. Note the terms he uses describing neoliberalism. And once again, you know, note his tone when you watch that. Pause here and flick over to that video. I mean, I'm quoting him here. Neoliberalism is the notion, the idea that the essence of democracy is about making money. The market is a template for all social relations. And then he talks about a massive transfer of public wealth to private hands. So you're seeing a similar feeling of anger there to Ferguson's tone. You know, this is something that Giroux's worried about. You know, he thinks it's scandalous. He thinks this is really damaging our society, damaging our public life, in as much as our public life is being privatized. So I'm giving you these 2 examples from thinkers, you know, closely allied to social work's way of thinking. Be mindful of this, you know, be mindful of the nervousness, the anxiety, and the anger in how social workers may see this political development. Very few of us see it neutrally. Most of us see it, you know, with anxiety, mixed with frustration, mixed with anger. Good on to have a look at how German social work authors have thought about this whole shift and to try and reconstruct some of their discourses. Discuss with your partner, how was it in Germany in a broader social policy sense? think of unemployment. Most of you are probably aware that when you were very small, there was a shift in our unemployment policy, a new law. How did German unemployment benefit change in the early 2000s? So there was a shift in the early 2000s. I studied social work in 2004. I think my Bennett was more or less finished. We had this new system in place when I started my social work studies. What is this system for processing unemployment benefits in Germany, and how did it differ from the system before? Try and reconstruct it in your heads. If I want to put a name to this, I'll pick a kind of unofficial name. Everybody talks about the Hartz IV reforms. It's not actually what the laws are called at all. If you look at the laws on the internet, you'll find they actually have quite long titles. And this was a colloquial expression. We named the law reforms after the gentleman who was on the head of the committee producing the concept. So we named it after this guy, Hartz. And that's kind of spread into everyday language. What is Hartz IV? It's an unemployment reform, and we can really make parallels to US unemployment reforms. The Americans had the idea of workfare or welfare to work, and that's really what this German approach is all about. It's a kind of a cluster, a bundle of measures. Indeed, what we call Hartz IV was the fourth of these particular laws with particular measures within it. What was it designed to do? It was designed to improve the efficient reintegration of unemployed people into the workforce. So we had people, they were jobless. We wanted to get them back into jobs quickly. Now you might be saying, hey, we wanted to do that all the time anyway. That was also a 20th century wish. And it really is the case. In a sense, that idea is nothing new. On the other hand, when I came to Germany in the year 2000, many of my German friends said that the system back then wasn't working so well. So maybe it was a more energetic idea to quickly reintegrate unemployed workers into the labour force. The reforms had particular details which were really, really interesting. Key themes of these reforms: conditionality. So the idea that, yes, you get your unemployment benefit, but if and only if you actively look for work, you actively take up job offers, and so on. That idea was much stricter post-Hartz IV than pre-Hartz IV. The idea of an obligation to work, the idea that the agency could find work for people. We had the rather bizarre concept of the €1 job, which I really scratched my head over back then. These were innovations of this reform package. And in a very, very general sense, the idea was to discourage passivity in the population. There was suggestions made that in the past, jobless people were somehow passively accepting that fate. And the idea was to try and remove that passivity, try and take measures to prevent that passive attitude developing. And maybe this concern of passivity is what led to this fascinating new German word, Aktivierung, which really intrigued me when I was talking with my German colleagues. The argument of our politicians back then, again, going back to the early 2000s, no longer should we just throw money at our needy people, but instead we should somehow mobilize them, activate these benefit and service recipients. Activate them, mobilize them to use their own energy, use their own resources, their own sense of responsibility, their own resources. And that explained this idea of Aktivierung. I asked my friends, where did this come from? And I've never really found a satisfying solution. Presumably, some journalist or politician used this term the first time and others picked up on it. But I can't find the original usage. So there's a mystery. If you do have an answer there, please email me. I'd really love to know. So I don't know where the word came from, but by the early 2000s, by the time I was a social work student, this work really was in circulation. And at the end of that decade, I was trying to start a PhD project. And talking with my German peers was quite difficult because I was always told, hey, you have to, if you want to compare social work, you have to talk about this Aktivierung question. And I couldn't even translate it. There isn't really an English word. Activation is not jargon from our social policy discourse, although the term I've noted, workfare, is, and there's other terms we can use. So Aktivierung through social policy. What about Aktivierung through social work? That was the natural question that social work thinkers were asking themselves. So a key expression of German social policy discourses in this period, the early 2000s, German social work authors, they looked for the trend of increasing Aktivierung in other areas, in their area, social work, children's services, and so on. And by and large, they found it. By and large, they found it. If you look at the publications of that period, authors were claiming that they were seeing this as a general trend, not just restricted to unemployment policy, but relating to all aspects of our social welfare state. And again, some of those books, of course, published in German, are well worth checking out if you want to get a flavour for the ideas at that time. Let me come to a close here. Hope you've enjoyed it. Last video coming up.